2,500 years ago, before Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, the Greek philosopher Heraclitus observed the ever present state of flux in everything. His philosophy on how everything flows is often paraphrased or misquoted as the only constant in life is change. On this episode of Jump the Queue, we're exploring transitions. Emma Lowe started out as a cancer researcher in Taipei, Taiwan, moved to Canada, and then discovered what she really liked was interacting with people going through transitions rather than cells going through transitions.
I'm Emma, originally from Taipei, Taiwan, and I'm first of my half of my life was a cancer researcher. In the beginning, I saw an amazing forensic mouse in a Princeton lab. So that kind of sparked me. How did we do that? How did scientists to do that? So that kind of sparks my curiosity in science. And then later in cancer, it's because my family got breast cancer, and that was a really heartbreaking experience to go through. And just wanted really to help to continue this in this field and finding a cure. One day we'll find a cure for cancer, and that was like my big wish. The truth is, I don't think anybody has found the exact cure for cancer yet, and that's just keep driving me to studying cancer research. Imagine myself of that little drop in the big ocean, but hopefully that will make wave later on in my career.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then when I from transition fly from Taipei to Kingston, Ontario, Canada, was originally for my graduate study. But at that time, had an opportunity to work in a startup, which online auction company, which is business. That's another transition. But what I found is I was doing as a part-time job, meeting the clients. And after speaking to the clients, you feel that deep pain and where they are. Just to quickly explain whether Maxo is an online auction company where help people through that transition stage in life. So the customers, they are going through this big life changes, but the stuff is getting in the way. So after talking to clients, like that really desire to help continue to jump out, and how can I help them to move forward faster so they can continue their life later on.
That's
Yeah.
really fascinating. I wonder, let's just talk about a separate transition. And I mean, it's related, but moving from Taiwan to Canada, that had to be a pretty drastic transition for you. What was the hardest part of that, just from a cultural standpoint?
I So big city girl into a little country town is definitely a culture shock. Um, I when I was here, I was like, wow, Canadians are so nice because they hold the door for everybody. And at the grocery store, um, and the cashier is like, oh, how's your day today? Like, how are you doing today? How's your day? And I genuinely thought they were interested in my day. So you see this little
Some of
girl.
them might be, some of
I
them might
know.
be.
You see this little girl rambling and with the cashier with a long lineup waiting after me, rambling about my day because I thought it was a genuine conversation.
Canadians are very polite. I think that is definitely a stereotype that has a lot of truth associated with it because they are very polite, and it's kind of funny that you maybe took that too far from time to time. So,
Yeah.
what did you learn in that transition that has helped you make these other transitions in your life?
I I'm always curious, like how to make things better. There must be a better way. There must be a better way in solving like this cancer situation, right? How to find a better, faster, or more personalized drug. That was my study.
Mm-hmm.
And in the case of the online auction part is how can I make this transition simpler or easier? So there must be a better way to sell items. There must be a better way to help clients, etc. And for me, the transition, it's always open, be open-minded, yeah, and really listening and always have that good intention in other people,
Mm-hmm.
and always being curious what made them to make the decision, or kind of just want to see a little bit deeply of what the intention, where they're coming from. I think that's a universally language, doesn't matter where you come from. That last company, it's been I think it was a good 11 years, and it's I feel it's time to grow, to try something different, and always been very interested in other areas or other startup businesses, like how do we start going from zero again. And I love, in the last year, I've been very grateful to be, um, that's when I started posting on LinkedIn again, and really open to the idea of community. And that's when you build a connections, you build a community from different discipline. I friend know people across from another um, countries. All these great conversations really bring out like the innovation, the curiosity, um, the different discipline. Like you can see that intersection of how you can grow again. So that kind of feel like it's time to start a new journey, and just also kind of also has a time to kind of pause and really focus on self again, and then start up. That's where I am right now. And now I have my own consulting company, which is helping local businesses how to scale up, or but I always remember customers front. So really want to like challenge them, like how do you put the customer needs in front? How do we make sure that our business is running around the customers, and really yeah, not just only making profits, but really serving what you set this product or service for.
Next, we talk to Tino Engel in Germany, who's transitioned from being a professional poker player to becoming a management trainer who uses poker to explore making choices and dealing with uncertainty in business and life.
I mean, first of all, I felt like when you said like the career, it's always interesting, right? Reframing or thinking about what is a career. Sometimes it's just like a variety of different stations that add up at one point, right? And you look back and say, "Oh, that was an interesting career." Um, many of those things, I don't want to say just happened, but it definitely wasn't planned. Let's put it this way. So I, back in the days, originally nearby in Potsdam, I studied sociology with a minor in psychology, which I really enjoyed. After spending amazing, I think, 8 weeks in economics, and then I changed it. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. Had great debates, and I stopped enjoying it when I finished university because being in a sense a social scientist, trying to jump into a job, I will never forget this. In the final phase, there was a lady coming from an institution of the government that is taking care that kids, in a sense, hopefully get a job. Like in German language, we call it the Arbeitslosenamt, right? So she showed up, giving us some final tips to how landing a job. And I will never forget this. In a sense, what she said is like, get amazing final grades. Okay, yeah, I saw that coming. Speak 4 languages. That's always a benefit in the job market. And be flexible, ready to travel everywhere. So she went on with the list, and I felt like, gee, this is not really helpful. right? I can't check mark for languages. I can't do this. I couldn't do that. And then I jumped into the job market. I had in a sense, an unpaid job for like 2 months where they were testing me. And I was sitting there at one point. I was really, it was not what I was looking for, because I was sitting in a room without a window, just evaluating all the theoretical tests you had to do if you want to get your driver's license in Germany, right? Because I realized, well, we're testing people and then they get the driver's license and at one point they crash, right? So maybe there are some logical flaws in there that we want to solve right from the get-go. And that was my job. And at the same time, I went to a party with some friends one Saturday, and party was crap, even with alcohol. And when I was ready to leave, I mean, that seriously is a sign it was really bad. And I saw some guys sitting in a corner having fun, and I went over, and it turned out they were playing a card game. And I'm coming from a family, we never really played board games at all. But I heard about poker a little bit. And they said, well, you can join if you want to. And I had to pay, I don't know, like a couple of, back in the days, D-Mark, Deutschmark. Was even before Euro. No, was even, no, after. Anyway, so I paid like, I don't know, €5 or something. It was quick money for them. And I really loved it from the get-go. I was bombarding them with questions because I found it really interesting. I can't really tell you why, but I will never forget how they told me when I left. And by the way, you can play it online for money. That sounds interesting, man. Playing a game online, making money. I mean, not just for money, but the idea, like earning money the playful way with something that you enjoy. I found it quite interesting. And so 24 hours later, I signed up for my first online account. Called my mom, got a credit card the first time. She trusted me and I said, you get it back. And of course, she got back the money later on because I had to borrow some money again, like just €50, something like this. And yeah, that was my way of getting into poker. And funnily, looking back also towards economics, my first experience in university, I was complaining that it was all about maths. It was boring. It was not about like looking at the big scale and international politics and everything. I suddenly found myself loving it, loving game theory, loving strategy, loving crunching the numbers, and doing something where I knew the better I get, the higher the chances are that I can make some money. And in the beginning, I was just playing for cent. Let's face it, I didn't have that much money. And then step by step, the first small parts, like, I don't know, 10 cents. One point it was €1, then it was €1.5. And over time, it became more than just a hobby, a passion. And then I decided to stop applying for jobs and to pause the applying for jobs phase for 1 year. That was my agreement with my wife at this point. And yeah, it turned out to be 5 years, 6 years that I did it professionally. So that was a big plan behind it.
Yeah, it fascinates me that skills that you think are very disparate, right? Sociology, studying human behavior, and economics, money theory, and
Yeah.
understanding how markets work, and also to some extent how people behave, came together for you as skills that were indispensable in poker.
Absolutely. Yeah. And interestingly, I don't know, maybe it's also because I was always very strong with planning. So I was never a big fan of uncertainty for a couple of also private reasons. When I grew up, there were certain elements of uncertainty in my family that I really didn't enjoy very much. So I always was looking forward and planning a couple steps ahead. And then suddenly looking back, it's ironically, maybe I found myself in situations where I had to deal with the thing that I felt I wasn't strong at, making choices and dealing with uncertainty, right? Because you never know, do I even have an edge in the game? Or like very specific things like, I don't know the next card. I don't know how this session will end. It could be a winning session. It could be a losing session. It leaves a lot of question marks in your mind. Am I good enough? A lot of room for self-doubts, right? You have to fill in the gaps. And in a sense, build your own story. You have to fill in the gaps, right? Because you can lose, even if you're good at the game, you can lose for days, for weeks, for months, right? And then keep in mind, you have the people around you who have no connection to poker, who just look at poker and say, that's all about gambling. How can you even make money with gambling? And I said, well, you're right, it can be gambling. So can life be gambling. And this maybe is also like what links it back to society, which I always found interesting. I see so much gambling going on in society and politics, where I feel like, man, maybe there's something you can learn also from poker, how not to gamble or gamble in an educated way. Let's put it this way, because you will do it anyway.
Yeah, and that speaks to the next transition that I want to talk to you about, because you took a lot of those skills and observations, things that you learned in the poker world, being a professional gambler, and transitioned into doing something, I don't want to say entirely different, but definitely different for you. Tell me about when you decided to say, well, I'm not going to be a professional poker player anymore, but I'm going to do something with those skills.
Yeah. So there are a couple of things that came together. The first is, I mean, my son was already born, and I kept playing like for 3 years. That's why I was very thankful that we had the internet, so I didn't have to travel, so I could combine both worlds, which I also learned to appreciate a lot. When I read like these days about people taking like 2 weeks, or fathers 2 weeks, 4 weeks off from the job, or 2 months, awesome. As I read, I had him every day the first year, right? Because I was at home and could really bring all those things together. And what was very clear was that we wanted to have a second child, and at the same time, the opportunity costs, I would say, got bigger and bigger. And by the beginning of 2015, it was very clear to me the market. I mean, poker was a highly competitive environment, and it was developing rapidly. So the edges were getting smaller unless you are really willing to put in the effort 24/7 with game theory, with databases analysis. It got very, very technical as well, and it was very energy draining, which is not a big surprise because poker, like it or not, winning and losing happens every day, right? And it's very hard to digest for the brain all those sometimes small losses over and over again, which makes it also a great playing field to train those skills dealing with losses. Specifically, winning is easy. Everybody can deal with winnings, at least, unless it's too much too quickly. But it was very energy draining. And then I said, okay, what about the future, right? I had the plan of playing poker as a side business, so to speak. That was my idea, like a compromise, and get a job next to it. And to me, it was very clear I wanted to get into the teaching because I really enjoyed doing it. And the first logical step was, I got more and more requests from people who asked me, "Hey, could you coach me, or could you do some stuff because you're very good with the technicalities and analyzing the game?" And then I started doing some work for some higher stakes players, right, who were playing higher, and they said, "Well, we outsource some of the stuff. We don't like to do it, but we would love you to do it." And it was interesting because I still could enjoy the game without having to play it necessarily and having all the pressure myself. And that's how I got into teaching step by step. And I came up with a plan. Okay, if I want to become a trainer in business, what do I need? I need communication skills, right? I need to have an idea how to build a business, right? Then I signed up for those courses. That was, again, me planning those things. Well, at the same time, it was quite challenging because I felt I had outgrown the traditional paths, right? All of my friends went into career or had a job that was far away from what I was doing. I was like, from that point of view, an outsider. I had 1 or 2 poker friends here in Germany. The rest was like living in other countries, sometimes even out of Europe. And yeah, then it wasn't planned when I joined like a communication club, Toastmasters. You might have heard about it, this public, non-profit public speaking organization. I met a lady from Great Britain here in Berlin that knew some guys that were using poker as a basis of management trainings in Hungary. And she connected us because they were coming from a management background, being passionate poker players. And I said, well, that's pretty cool. You have what I don't have, the business background. We like using the game, not just for playing the game, but using it for higher purposes at one point. And then we met. And yeah, so I met with the guys from a company called Action Lab. We sat together, and the idea was born to bring it to Germany. So that was my journey, like for 2 years. And suddenly I found myself being a business, right? Talking to people from the corporate world. I had no button-up shirt or anything like this. I had no suit. So again, me planning, I ran to a guy who had the profession of advising people how to dress because I said, I want to save time. I went to him, we went shopping. I said, I need A, B, C, D. He gave me good advice. And then that was me standing in business, pitching training programs to HR, right? And it was, what I found really interesting was, to me, they all had a great career, right? So I found myself sitting at the desk of, I will never forget, one lady. And it was fascinating. She said, "Yeah, let's talk a little bit about you. Introduce yourself a little bit." So we got into this chit chat and tell me about your background. That's what she asked me, and I gave you a rough, very short version of what I've told you here. And she said, "Man, Tino, your background, your biography, it's so exciting." And I said, "What?" I said, "It sounds more like an accident from many different angles." And she was really, and for her, being in the corporate world, it was just ordinary stuff. And then she gave me her bio, right? And said she studied, I don't know, in Shanghai. She did this. And, wow, that's fascinating to me. But it was interesting. It's all a matter of what you know, right? What you know and what you're used to. And suddenly, as the saying goes, the grass on the other side is always looking greener. I don't know. That's, for them, it was quite interesting because, hey, you have played poker for a living? I said, yeah, I had to. And I loved it. And here I am trying to do something different now.
Yeah.
And maybe not that different, but a little bit at least.
Yeah, a little bit. I think the fascinating part to me, and you kind of alluded to this, is the combination of preparation and planning with chance
Yeah.
that takes us in a particular direction. And poker is very much like that, right? But life is also very much like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, I think the planning is also, even or specifically in an environment where you have so much change like poker, or life where you even have more change. I don't advise like over planning, but having a plan, because I have experienced firsthand again and again how much you deviate between what you think you will do in a certain situation, and then when the pressure is high, you do the opposite. And then you look back and say, man, I'm such an idiot. My plan was, if this person comes along with a race at the poker table, I'm out. I fold my cards, I'm done. What happened? You place a bet, they raise it up, and you, without thinking, you just boom, click, call, and you pay them off. And you feel like an idiot because you saw it coming. So have a plan for the situations where, it can get emotional, or I can get surprised when you go into negotiation, or when I'm talking about training programs to companies. Have at least a decent plan, and not try to figure it out on the spot, which some people think, oh, I improvise everything. I do. And I say, well, your brain is, you can improvise if you have done it again and again, if you're really good at improvising, but then you can save the time for planning because you have done it so many times.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can start trusting your instinct more and more. But besides that, I think planning a little bit is helpful, right?
Yeah, that's great advice. Finally, I talk with an old colleague, Michael Hanks, who discusses keys to leading people he learned and utilized through multiple career transitions.
Yeah, I will tell you the first thing that comes to mind is just understanding that we are a people-ran business. When you work in any role or position, you're more than likely, unless you're an individual contributor, you're going to have people that you support directly in some way, shape, or form. And I know it's easy to say this, but relationships truly are everything. Being able to meet people where they are, being able to help them understand what success looks like in the role that they're in, and getting people like naturally, genuinely inspired about the work they do and how they contribute and make an impact within the team and the organization they support. I think it's so important no matter what your role is, whether you're risk, whether you're customer support, people leadership is people leadership. And that translates anywhere. And so that was something that I learned very early on, especially as a young leader. When you're moving into a leadership role at 19 years old and you have folks reporting to you who are 20 years your senior, you have a responsibility to earn their respect and build that relationship and let them know that you're there for a reason. And it's not just to manage them, but it's to support them, that you can add value to what they do, and you can assist them. And even though they have a lot more wisdom per se and experience, but you have a certain skill set that you can offer to enhance where they are today. And I think that's important, is just understanding like who people are, meet them where they are, build that relationship, create that type of environment where you can have open and honest and trusting communication, and then challenge each other to be better and make sure that that feedback is going both ways. And I think that's sometimes lost upon us a little bit, right? It's like you have this hierarchy and the feedback is to go straight down that hierarchy. In all honesty, I will tell you, even today, 80% of the feedback I get is from people that I support directly. And that has always been the most impactful feedback that I've received, because if anyone knows where I'm doing well and where I'm falling short, it's the people who have to deal with me on a day-to-day basis. So there's just huge value in that. So I'll sum that up by saying relationships. Don't overlook it. They're incredibly important. The second piece I will say is, making sure that you have a plan. And again, that is translatable to any type of role you're in, but having a plan, having a vision. People won't really want to be, and I want to be a part of a team and an organization where I know where we're going. I know what we're trying to accomplish. I know how I contribute to those goals. And I know what my leader is thinking about on a regular basis and how they define success and how our organization is defining success. So no matter what role you're in, make sure I'm always making sure that I'm very clear on what my vision is, what the goals of the organization are, how we're progressing against those goals, and also being very honest and showing some humility and saying, we're falling short. We're falling short. And let's be comfortable talking about that as well. So I think those are two very, very important pieces, among a lot of other things that are always very top of mind for me when I'm thinking about leading teams and contributing to an organization.
You talked about something that I want to dive into a little bit deeper, and that is really those relationships. And I think we see this a lot in contact centers, but it's not relegated to contact centers. And that is when you're leading people there's a significant age gap and you're younger. Can you talk to me about kind of your first experience with that, maybe how you approached that, what you learned along the way, and maybe how you changed your approach going forward so that you were most successful when you were in that situation?
Yeah, it's amazing that you have, throughout your career, throughout your work journey, you have different experiences that stand out. And I can tell you, I remember the individual's name. One of the first person that I managed and I had struggles with. I can see their face right now. I stubbed my toe very early on in my career and my ability to manage folks who had different perspectives and personalities and maybe didn't have the same like competitive nature that I had. I struggled leading those folks in my first couple of years. And that's because, in honesty, I kind of wore this badge of honor of like, if you're not doing it my way, then you're not doing it the correct way. And so I did. I really am a firm believer that like you do have to fail to continue to learn and grow and develop as a person and as a leader. And I've had a lot of failures along the way. There's no doubt about it. And that's one of them. So when I think about the approach, I would tell you I entered into a reporting relationship very early on with someone who was twice my age. And, I didn't even recognize that. And I think that's important too, is when you're working with individuals who have a lot of experience, like there should, in my opinion, should be a natural respect and appreciation of what someone has learned along that journey. Like, that's what I would hope I'd get today as someone who, a little bit older as well in managing folks, is, that I've had a lot of experiences along the way that have helped me become the person I am, the leader that I am, have the character that I am, the wisdom that I have, the better decision making that I have. And I really believed early on that to lead people, you just do it one way and everyone should follow that way and everything will be great. in my early conversations with this individual, it wasn't great, and I found in the moment, I thought that they were incredibly defensive and not open to talking to me, and I made assumptions around why that could be. And the relationship was just very troubling early on. And I will tell you, I had to get feedback from different individuals about how to approach the situation and understand. And a lot of that feedback was just get real, like be honest, be comfortable having the conversation, be comfortable saying how you feel and where you're at. And I remember sitting in the fishbowl, which I know you're familiar with, at Convergys, and having that very real conversation, just raw, real conversation with the individual saying like, hey, here's the way that I feel, and I feel like sometimes I feel a little bit judged because of my age or maybe my experience. And we had that conversation. And in all honesty, they felt the exact same way, but from a different perspective. Like, hey, I feel like that you don't recognize the fact that I've been doing this for 20 years and I know what I'm doing,
Yeah.
But it was that real conversation. Again, I won't kind of carry that on too much further, but from that moment, we at least had a good understanding of where we were. And I will tell you that individual became an amazing employee, eventually a manager. And a lot of that, I just go back to the fact that we built a strong relationship foundationally that day, by just being honest and being very real. And, once we kind of understood where we were coming from, we weren't as defensive. We were very much more open to talk, and we even joked a little bit, at times. And so I think at the end of the day, it's just, again, it goes back to like, you need to meet people where they are and understand who they are and their experiences. And as a leader, there's no one way to lead. You have to be able to adapt your leadership style and your communication, your approach to the audience of the individuals that you're talking to. And that was a lesson I learned not only that day, but I continued to learn other days through my career.
Next in Queue is brought to you by Happy To and is produced by me, Rob Dwyer. If you enjoy this podcast, please by all means subscribe and or rate this podcast in iTunes or your favorite podcast app. But more importantly, please tell just one person about this podcast. Word of mouth is the best way for people to discover new content. As always, thanks for listening.